where you start is not where you have to stay.
Yes.
And it's not where you're going to stay. So with that, every little step. And that was something I had to look at when I was starting the TV show. I had no idea how to host a TV show. And because you're looking at the camera, you've got a guest you have to have a conversation with. There's multiple cameras and angles. And literally you have a producer speaking in your ear when you're trying to listen to the conversation with your guest. There's so much going involved. But for me, it became, how can I, after every show became, so how can I best serve? And I focused on at the very beginning of the TV show, how can I best serve my guests who are sitting in front of me and helping them to be comfortable? Once I got comfortable with that, I became, okay, so how can I then learn to ask questions differently? How can I learn to engage differently with the audience? And just, it's that gradual process. When I look at my earliest shows, like episode 1, season 1, it just, like guest one, I laugh now at how I almost sometimes cringe and don't want to watch. But I just, wow. But then you look back and say, like, you're able to say, look how much I grew. Like if you take one step every single day all year, that's 365 steps.
Mm-hmm.
And just like being grateful and just say, okay, that's what I did. And being able to acknowledge that. And even small wins are big wins, because those leaps that we see, these overnight successes that are years in the making, it's because someone chose to take and continuously keep taking steps.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to another episode of the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. Today we're joined by Danielle Joworski. Danielle, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Brian and Tanya, for having me here today.
No, it's our pleasure. Now let's start off by learning a little bit more about you. Who is Danielle Joworski?
Sometimes I wish this was a really simple answer, although I realize that who I am today, it's the person who's been on this journey of really self-discovery, understanding what I'm passionate about, and then finding the courage to keep taking the steps forward towards doing things I've never done before. I never thought I would do in my career, never imagined it, but yet just feels so right.
Okay. So I know you and we talked prior to this, and, just learning a little bit about you. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I have here you are an entrepreneur coach, and you work specifically with women.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So getting back into that, it's interesting, right? Because we see that over the years, not as many people are staying in the same line of work, right? Like years and years ago, parents, grandparents, and all that, they started a job and then that's where they retired. And obviously nowadays, like so many different things happen in life. People evolve, people change, their passions change, and that's totally fine. But also sort of just figuring out afterwards when that does pop up in someone's mind, okay, I know that I don't want to do this. I don't know exactly what the next steps are. And that's where you come in, correct?
That is part of it. Absolutely. So going back to a little bit about who I am. So I'm someone who I was on the corporate ladder. I loved working in corporate. I had a goal when I was in university that by the age of 40, I wanted to have that manager title and be making a certain amount of money. And I achieved all that by 38. So during my career, I was very focused on not necessarily climbing the ladder, but always starting in a position. I would really get used to it. I would do well at it. And then it was always, what's next? What's next? What's that next step? And I was always quick to change. Early on in my career, I think it was only a couple years in, and I was on a role 3 or 4, like title 3 or 4, and on company 2, looking to go to company 3. I remember my dad saying to me, whoa, slow down. What are you doing? You're moving a lot. And I said, oh, it's okay, Dad. At that time, I think I'd read a stat that we would have 7 career changes in our lifetime. I was a little ahead of the curve at that point in time with 3 or 4. I thought that's okay. It meant that I saw it as we're supposed to be changing. And it just, for me, I think I was ahead of my curve where I would get in, I would get good at something. I'm like, okay, so what's next? What's that next move? And I had no problems jumping industries. I went from the food industry to pharmaceutical. Earlier in my career, I went from working more in quality, so very stringent systems, processes, to the manufacturing side of things, which is an interesting change in relationship. But it was always that, what can I learn now? What can I apply that I know? What can I get better at? And then what's next? And then it was just this pattern I went into. And finally, I achieved those goals that I had set for myself in university at 38. And I kind of looked and said, oh, what's next? I didn't know what that next was. And I got to a point in my career where I thought, this is no longer my path. So I stepped off. And I stepped out and I became an entrepreneur, but really having no goals around that, because it was never part of the plan. It was never part of that very logical, linear career plan. And when I stepped out that first time, literally at 40, I looked around like I really struggled, because it was no longer that linear, logical, that thinking that I had been using before. And I didn't have a plan. So I really, really kind of felt lost and struggled that first time I stepped out of corporate.
So what happened after that? You didn't have a plan? What did you do?
No plan. It's interesting because when I stepped out of corporate, the idea was the fact that I would just take a few months off. It was heading into the summer. I just spent it reconnecting with my kids, and then coming up with that idea of what am I going to do next? And by the time the summer came to the end, I had connected with my kids. That was great, but I had no idea what I was going to do next. That was not clear. I looked around at all of my friends who just loved what they did and loved their careers. And at that time, they all just happened to be entrepreneurs. They were all successful. They loved what they did. And I thought, oh, well, that's what I want to do too. I want to feel that way too. And the internet, especially at that time, was making it seem really easy. So I thought, oh, so how hard can it be to become an entrepreneur? So that's what I decided to do. But at the same time, I had no plan on what I wanted to do. The transition out of corporate, I felt like I had lost my identity. I realized now that I had defined myself, and my self-image was all around that title that I had, that salary I was earning, that hustle and bustle. And then when I didn't have it anymore, it became, oh, who am I? And I was trying to build this business and trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. How did I want to help others? At the same time, also trying to figure out who I was, and also who did I want to be. So I struggled that first business, that first time. I absolutely struggled to the point where I say I failed in so many elements, because I failed to be able to create a thriving business where I could support not just myself, but my kids. And there's a lot of failures around the fact that I could not be visible. I was so afraid to put myself out there, to show my face, to make a video, to get in front of a camera, to share an opinion, because I didn't want others to not like what I was saying or who I was. And so from a visibility perspective, I was afraid to put myself out there. From a clarity perspective, I really didn't get clear on what I could do to help others and what I wanted to do. And then I just had this whole piece around knowing who I was and what are my strengths. And now how can I transition out of corporate and leverage those strengths and apply it to something in the entrepreneurial world? So I failed. And after about 2.5 years, I made the decision to step back into corporate, to reset and to figure myself out and what that future me and future business looks like.
And, people, I guess, shy away from that word fail, right? No, everybody starts something not necessarily thinking it's going to come to an end. It's not going to be successful. But I think at the end of the day, there's also nothing wrong with that. And definitely nothing wrong with saying, you know what, this didn't work right now. I'm going to go back and I'm going to go into something that I know for sure is going to work until I can figure out the next step, right?
And I think it's a matter of perspective too, because like you said, Danielle, you took the opportunity to reset. First strategy didn't work. What's next?
Yeah,
absolutely. And it was hard because when I was in the entrepreneurial world and I was making that decision and that choice to go back to corporate, there was so much shame. I felt shame and guilt, the idea that I had succeeded in corporate, yet here I couldn't succeed. Why could I not succeed as an entrepreneur? And then this idea of I felt guilty and shame around the fact that I wouldn't be able to support my kids. If something happened, I would not be able to support my family. As a parent, that's not what I wanted to feel. And it's interesting, this whole idea about we don't talk about failures or see it in a necessarily a positive light. I was having a conversation about this just the other day with my husband. I said, well, I failed. There were so many things I failed in that first time. His response was, no, you didn't fail. And he's trying to be all nice and make it all positive. And I said, no, at the end of the day, and it's okay. And I'm okay. It took some time for me to get comfortable with the idea that it was okay for me to fail. And yes, I failed because I failed to reach the goals that I had in that first business. So I failed, and that it's okay to talk about that, because for me, it became these very valuable lessons that when I stepped out that second time in 2021, it became, let's learn from those failures.
Right.
Let's not repeat them. What has to be done differently?
Now, can we talk about some of the, I guess, some of the challenges there with that first business? You know, when you did some, I guess, looking back at the situation, what were some of the things that caused challenges for you that you were able to take from that and apply to the next business?
Great question. So one of the challenges was at the very beginning, I didn't have clarity on what it is that I truly wanted. I had all these different ideas and, oh, these are all great things. But then I almost became, there was this shiny object. Well, I'm going to try this. And if it didn't work for a couple of weeks, and I gave myself these really short timelines in which to actually take action on something and to see if there was going to be a result. So I was into this really instant gratification, because that's what I believe. When you started moving towards something and it was right, you would see automatic results, not realizing and believing that sometimes it takes time to get traction. People need to catch up to you. And also people need to be able to see and find you. But if I kept switching and shifting and changing paths and courses, people just couldn't keep up with me in that sense. So I couldn't get traction in any one thing. So clarity on what it is that I wanted to do, or even the how, I didn't have that the first time. The second time when I stepped out, I spent about 6 weeks. I finished in corporate on the Friday. On the Tuesday, I started in a women's entrepreneurial program where the first lesson was all about, what is that vision? What is your mission? So I spent 6 weeks getting really clear on who I am, how do I want to help, what does that look like, but what is this overall vision and mission that I really want to be working towards, so that every step that I took aligned to that. So that's one of the biggest first steps that I took, was getting that clarity around what it is they wanted to do, who they wanted to help, and why.
When you figured that out, share a little bit in regards to what it is you started in 2021.
Yes. So in 2021, I started, it was basically a business focus on, it was coaching women. At the very beginning, it just became, I want to help women overcome the challenges that they were experiencing either in their business or the career. That came from the fact that when I stepped back into corporate, and I remember I had visibility problems in my first business, which was one of the major reasons why I failed and had to return to corporate. When I got back into that environment, I started just seeing and being amongst other women who had different career challenges. And I would hear these conversations and think, oh, I used to have that challenge, but I don't anymore. Why? And it came back over and over again that I didn't have these different career challenges that I was seeing other women experience and sharing with me, because I had met women entrepreneurs when I was in that world. And I went to them for coaching, support, and their different services, that I was able to move past those challenges. And I thought, well, if this happened to me, and I feel so much better about it, even though I had failed, I started to have this realization that, hey, I know people. And it became, do you know someone who could help me with ABC? And it was, yeah, I do. But if this is just my little network that needed help and I could connect people, what if I could do it on a bigger scale? That's where the idea for a TV show came from. So I had this idea. So I created, pitched, and then ended up producing and hosting a TV show called The C-Suite on Rogers TV that was all focused on helping to connect women's career challenges to the solutions that women entrepreneurs provided. It was this platform for women to be seen, to be heard, and their challenges to be identified, talked about. But at the end of the day, it was this platform for women's voices and for women to get out there and promote themselves on. In order to do that, I obviously had to get over that fear of cameras, that fear of being visible, not just as an entrepreneur, because I was in the corporate world as well. And what I was doing, it was nothing even remotely close to what I was going to be doing this TV show for. So I had to get really comfortable really fast with becoming visible. And I was able to do that because I really started to believe in the need for the outcome that I was providing. I had a hard time believing that I could do it because I have no background in broadcasting and media, but I just believed that this was needed. The solution was needed. So I got a coach to help me be more comfortable on camera. And then that was the show. And the show took off from there. After 3 seasons, I was finishing off and I thought, I want to do more. What's next? And that's where the idea for continuing to help women in that element of moving through their careers or transitioning from their careers into an entrepreneurial environment or growing in the entrepreneurial environment. That's where this idea came from. I want to help women do that. How am I going to do it? I can share my experiences. I'm able to coach. And that's what I started doing back in 2021, is just getting very firm and I want to help women get seen and heard at the end of the day and to become more visible. And that's basically started off that whole path to where I am today.
Okay. So those 3 seasons, like you said, right? You were not expecting any of that, but all the challenges that came up. So as we were talking, I'm like, obviously I know challenges even just, from when I was working outside of the home. But I guess if I can narrow it down to 5, what were the top 5 challenges that you continue to see during those seasons of working with women?
So the challenges from my perspective as an entrepreneur, or the challenges that other women were experiencing?
Yeah, the challenges that other women were experiencing.
Absolutely. So one of the biggest challenge is around the fact that there's the not having a plan. So it could be like women coming onto the show and I want to come on the show. That's great. Why? Like what's the intention behind coming onto the show to promote yourself, to share what it is that you do? Or even in your career, that clarity around what the next step. So a biggest challenge I was seeing a lot of women in both worlds, so corporate and entrepreneurial, is just around that clarity around what's that next step? What are they moving towards? And not necessarily even feeling very excited about what that next step could be or connected to it. So that would definitely be challenge number 1. Challenge number 2 was around the fact that even if you had clarity, there were so many doubts, worries, and fears that women have about their ability to take that next step. Or they would get really stuck in the how. Well, how am I supposed to do something I've never done before? And that would just make them either stall out, slow down, or really just truly get stuck and not move forward whatsoever. And then it came down to a third piece would be around this idea about belief, of believing in your ability to do something different. And I like to talk about belief in a few different ways, where you don't necessarily have to believe in yourself, but you can believe in the outcome of something that you want to do. You can believe in the need for why you need to take a next step, or you can believe in someone else's belief in you. And what I really saw, what was beautiful, is the fact that, especially because I work with women, you see a lot of women really connecting and wanting to support each other. And so when we help each other to kind of get to that next step, you're able to believe in someone else's belief in yourself. Which is funny because sometimes we have a hard time believing that we can do something, but when someone else says you can do it and you have support and cheerleading, it's interesting because then all of a sudden we think, okay, well, someone else thinks I can do it, then maybe I can. Mm-hmm. I can do that. So those are kind of the three biggest challenges I would see in both. And it really came down to, and I'll say one more, which is the visibility piece. So women either in their careers or business, it was, even though you want to be seen, you want to get to that next promotion, you want to get that next level in your business, you want to try a new business stream, it means you have to be seen in a different way. Right. And there's this perception around how you needed to be seen. And if we didn't match that perception, then it would hold you back as well.
Okay. And, for women, I'm going to speak for myself, we always think if there's an idea, whether it be your career or anything, like there's somebody better There's somebody who has already been doing this for X amount of time, and there's no space. Right. So there's all that self-talk that comes too. And I'm sure when you're working with the women that you work with, you guys unpack that. But looking at the fear of failure and also the fear of success too. Right. And how to push through that, because yeah, we have that negative self-talk, but also, okay, wow, this is actually turning out to be something, this is picking up the business, that this thing and the next. And it's like, okay, wow, things are moving really fast. And then that fear of success as well. So how do you work with women when, they're going through that?
Absolutely. I'm glad you talked about the fear of failure and the fear of success, because that definitely is one of the reasons why a lot of women feel they hold back. One, you don't necessarily see, is there space? Like is there space for me in sometimes what may seem like a crowded environment? The flip side is I don't see anybody like me in this environment that I want to get into. So there's the fear of, moving forward, but also the fear of failing back. And the fear of success, it's real. And what I see a lot of with women is more when they think about this fear of success, it becomes what if? Because I work with women who really think and dream big. Like these are really big goals that they're having. And it becomes, what if I actually achieve that? Because it's bigger, bolder than anything they've experienced. Also, the realization of how is this going to impact my life? That becomes a reality. How is it going to impact my family? That becomes a reality. And there's a lot of fears around that as well, because how they envision that life is so different than where they are today. They're just not able to see how to make that all possible. But yet at the same time, we think big, but then we have to remember that it all happens over time. And as you grow and evolve and take different steps, then you actually create the time and space for yourself to make the shifts and changes to your life that you need to in order to support that continued growth and that success.
Now I'm thinking women, we come from all different backgrounds, and, entrepreneurs, ladies are looking at things differently. So if you're married, maybe coming out of corporate and starting something financially, that could work because you have a spouse that's able to, still has that paycheck coming in. So there's some flexibility there, right? Then maybe there's a single mom, or there's a single lady who's trying to start something. That's going to look different for them, right? Because it's okay, there's nobody else to cover this rent, cover this mortgage. So when you're working with women, do these type of worries and concerns come up? I'm sure they do.
Absolutely. Especially for the women who are stepping out of corporate into an entrepreneurial world, it becomes, so how do I make this happen? What does the timing look like? And then also there's that big visibility piece too, because all of a sudden you're growing this business where you need to be seen as this business owner and that expert in what it is that you do, but yet you're also working. And then the fear of, what's my company going to say? Can I do this? Are they going to like it? Are they going to support me? So there's definitely a lot of fear around that. And so when women are looking at those bigger transitions, it becomes, so what is that further goal? Or they're looking to do something really different. And my big thing is I'm all about finding there's always more than one way to achieve a desired outcome. It's just more, how do you create that openness and that thinking in seeing something that's not necessarily logical? What are illogical steps that you could be taking that we innately will just dismiss because it doesn't make any sense, or other people won't go for it? But yet when you take illogical steps, it almost becomes more natural. It almost becomes more fun. So when someone's trying to make a big transition, or really to do anything in their business, what is that bigger goal? Like, what is that intention behind what it is you're trying to achieve? And then break it down. I call it reverse engineering. You can just basically reverse engineering, break it down into really, really small steps. And what is that next step that you need to take in order for you to move forward? And what does that look like? And that way you can also, decrease the unpredictableness. You can increase the known outcomes. You can identify who you need to help you with. And you can also identify opportunities or even threats a lot more clearly, so that you know where you want to go, but you break it down to smaller steps that are easier to take. There's less risk involved, but that at the end of the day, you're still moving forward.
Yeah, that just came to mind, that less risk, right? Because we want to do it everybody wants to do it. Maybe, sorry, I shouldn't say everybody, but the people that do want to do it. But it's just like, okay, where do I start? Or, you don't have to be all in, really. I know it sounds different, but you can have that 1 foot here and 1 foot there as you're working to the next thing, because you said then it takes that, it keeps the enjoyment too, right? You're still excited, where that stress level can remain low. Not that you've like given up everything and you now have to figure out how you're going to pay the bills, right? You also don't want to go that extreme.
Exactly. And for someone who literally, I stepped out when I was 40, and I stepped out the first time, no plan. It was just literally on my birthday. I said to my husband, like, I'm done. I just need something else, and became, well, okay, so what's the plan? And he was all big on a plan. I said, no, let's just, again, because the idea was I would only be out for a couple of months. So it's absolutely scary, and it becomes that. So what are the risks involved? And being very clear and honest with yourself. What are the risks when you're making these big changes? What are these risks? Understanding what they are from a financial, even from like an activity perspective. How much capacity do you have? And also realizing and giving yourself grace that, yes, there's this thing that you want to work towards, but you have to, again, maintain your life right now. You need to pay your bills and things like that, because you don't want to add that stress and worry onto growing a business. So it becomes, it's okay that it might take you a little bit longer. We're in a society where everything is instant. Everything is short. Our videos are becoming shorter online, and our internet speeds, if they don't load super fast, we get frustrated. But realizing it, when this bigger goal that you're working towards, this potentially a dream that you want to do, it will take time, and that's okay. And understanding that, your time and the amount of time you're able to dedicate to, if you want to grow a business and you have a corporate career as well, the amount of time you have is completely unique to you. Yet it could be so hard when you look at the internet and you hear of overnight successes. You feel, and I work with a lot of women where they feel this sense of, well, I'm moving too slow. Well, everyone else is moving ahead of me so much faster. But it's giving yourself that grace to say, as long as you're continuously taking steps. And I have something called the rule of one, where what is one step that you can take? What is one step you can take to get 1% better and one step closer to achieving what it is you want? So as long as you're taking one step every day, then you're moving towards it. And realizing that sometimes that one step is just getting up in the morning. It's answering one email, or even that one step could be, I need to just not look at that today because life needs me today. But giving yourself a lot of grace and taking off that pressure, and almost sometimes giving yourself permission that the pace that you want to move forward at, it's truly unique to who you are. You are on your own journey, but yet you control how fast you want to go or not, but how you need to integrate everything. But just be able to give yourself that grace and permission to say, I'm on my own journey, and it's yours and no one else's.
Now, I want to shift gears a little bit. So obviously you have years of corporate experience to draw from, as well as the time that you've spent coaching in entrepreneurial environments. I'm just curious, listening to all of the guests that you've interviewed and, all of your coaching clients, what's the most impactful, or, one of the more impactful lessons that you've learned from somebody else's experience?
Oh, that's a great question. And for me, what really always impacts me the most, it would be almost a general, where it's women who have, or guests who have just really overcome these challenges, and being able to look back and say, well, this is what I learned, and this is how I approached it. Because at the end of the day, like a lot of times we're sharing them. And that's what I love too. And this biggest thing that I love about the guests that I've had is that women are so open at sharing. They've been so open at sharing their experiences, sharing their failures, and then also seeing it for the lessons. Now that they've gone past, they can look back and see it as lessons. But it's this idea that they've had these challenges and they're being open and vulnerable to sharing them with other people, opening up and sharing a little bit about who they are, what didn't go well in their life. And in this effort to let other people know that a lot of times we're not alone. We think we're alone in the challenges that we have and we've been going through. But so often when we share them, There's people, and I would hear this from, as guests would come on the show, I would hear from viewers, yes, that's what I needed to hear. Like, we think we're so isolated and alone in our challenges, yet when we share them, we realize other people are going through things. And when you're ahead of it, you're able to share your knowledge, what worked for you, what didn't work for you, so that at the end of the day, other people can move through that easier, simpler, faster, or just know that they aren't alone. So that's something that really has always impacted me, was women's vulnerability to come forward and share and say, life hasn't been perfect. I'm not perfect, but this is who I am. This is how I'm moving forward. And I want other people to know that message too.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of these platforms, are that you never know who's listening. You never know who they may share it with and how it's going to impact them.
Exactly.
So I guess just in, wrapping up the conversation, I wanted to go back to that rule of one. I wrote it down because I think that is so important for anybody who's listening, whether you are starting off a business, whether you're a mom and your mat leave is coming to an end and you're not wanting to go back to that corporate world. It doesn't matter whether you're a successful business owner at this point. We all get that sense of overwhelm. And I think it was so important, it's so important what you speak with your clients about, and, what you just share, that it's one thing at a time, one thing to do better every day. Right. And I think that can definitely decrease the stress, the sense of overwhelm, and anything else regarding that. And, maybe if people are feeling like, I don't even know where to start, or if at that point, if I just want to give up, just remembering that, I think that is so important.
In addition to the rule of one, is this idea where you start is not where you have to stay.
Yes.
And it's not where you're going to stay. So with that, every little step. And that was something I had to look at when I was starting the TV show. I had no idea how to host a TV show. And because you're looking at the camera, you've got a guest you have to have a conversation with. There's multiple cameras and angles. And literally you have a producer speaking in your ear when you're trying to listen to the conversation with your guest. There's so much going involved. But for me, it became, how can I, after every show became, so how can I best serve? And I focused on at the very beginning of the TV show, how can I best serve my guests who are sitting in front of me and helping them to be comfortable? Once I got comfortable with that, it became, okay, so how can I then learn to ask questions differently? How can I learn to engage differently with the audience? And just, it's that gradual process. When I look at my earliest shows, like episode 1, season 1, it just, like guest one, I laugh now at how, I almost sometimes cringe and don't want to watch. I just, wow. But then you look back and say, like, you're able to say, look how much I grew. Like, if you take one step every single day all year, that's 365 steps.
Mm-hmm.
And just like being grateful and just say, okay, that's what I did, and being able to acknowledge that. And even small wins are big wins, because those leaps that we see, these overnight successes that are years in the making, it's because someone chose to take and continuously keep taking steps, whatever that looks like to them.
No, 100%. I can't remember who said this, but I just remember listening to an interview where someone said, yeah, it was an overnight success. It only took me 20 years. So, something along those lines. Now, again, kind of want to shift gears again. Now, just, again, knowing what you know now, if you were able to go back to visit Danielle on the day after her 40th birthday, when, you decided to take this plunge, and you had a few minutes to talk to her, what advice would you share? Or what would you tell her just to prepare her for what's coming?
Wow, that's a great question. One thing is believe in yourself. Believe in yourself more, because that's something I really struggled with, believing in who I was and that what I could do, is that self-belief piece, that I am enough. I am enough. I am good enough. I'm strong enough. And that piece is believe in me. And I would also warn myself, because it's funny, like, even though I look back at everything that happened, and there was lots of things that were not positive. There was a lot of negative things that happened, a lot of days where they were not good for me. And I struggled to get out of bed. I'll be very honest about that. I can look back now and say to myself, part of the struggles that I had are actually the foundation and the catalyst for my passions today. So why am I passionate about helping other women to be seen and heard? Because I failed in my business. And I suffered in my business because I couldn't do that. And I don't want other women to have to go through that. So sometimes the lessons is on believe in yourself a little bit more. And also, yeah, just that's really good. Like the belief, that's what's really coming to me. Just believe in yourself, and that not that there's a purpose to what you're going through, because I'm sure at the time I wouldn't have, I didn't want to hear that, but believe like there, I'm on a journey and it's my journey, and to focus on me and not what a lot of other people think as well. Where I struggled a lot with visibility too is the fact that, again, I came from corporate, I dressed corporate, I love my shoes, and I would go into a lot of networking events with other women, and I would be pulled aside and I would be told, look around the room, see what everyone else is wearing, and try to dress more like them. Because I like, okay, so I'm not fitting in, I'm not good enough, I'm making other people uncomfortable. So as you're trying to grow a business and you want people to work with you, like, oh, there's something about me that isn't connecting because of how I look. And so then I started trying and dressing like other people, and it didn't feel good. And I realized now it's because I was trying to be somebody that I wasn't. So when you talk about imposter syndrome, I was showing up as somebody that I just was not meant to be. It was for all the wrong reasons, which is why now when I talk about visibility, it's understanding who you are, what does visibility mean to you, and who you are right now is just fine. If you want to wear heels and corporate wear like I do, then wear it, like own that, because that's who you are. And I like to say, like, my definition of imposter syndrome is when you have that clear goal that you're working towards, as you take those steps, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to be awkward because you're doing things that are not, like, you're not used to. They're not your normal. They haven't been practiced yet. You're not an expert in it yet. So you're going to feel weird and awkward. But when you're doing things that are aligned to that goal that you have, to who that person is that you want to be, that's not being an imposter. That's you bringing that future version of yourself into the present and you practicing being that person. For me, being an imposter is when I'm showing up in a way that is not in alignment with what it is that I'm looking towards, with who I am. That's when I'm an imposter, because I'm trying to show up as someone who just isn't the person that I want to be or doing the things that I want to do.
Now, just thinking of that example there, actually, or for someone, for any ladies or really anybody who's coming into these situations, and well, when you have lofty goals, there are going to be times where you have to do things that are uncomfortable. And using any example, how do you coach somebody through that process?
Yeah, it's understand first having that very clear. So, what are you working towards? And if something is uncomfortable, so I deal with a lot of women who are trying to become more visible in their business. That next big step is getting on camera. It becomes, so what does that look like for you? And then how can you break it down? Again, like reverse engineer it, and just really have more fun with it. So what are those tiny, tiny little steps? Are you actually taking pictures of yourself and putting them on social media? No. Okay, that might be a first step to take, is just get comfortable seeing your face out in the virtual world. Or it could be even women in corporate. I want that promotion, but I need to be seen as a leader. Well, sometimes then we're going to have to put up our hand in a meeting, or we're going to have to turn our cameras on. When we're on Zooms and everyone else has their cameras off, but you want to be seen, turn that camera on. So finding ways that, again, breaking down that visibility step, break it down into smaller steps. There's so many different ways to become visible, to work towards that lofty goal that are smaller, that don't have to seem as so big and ominous. So break it down into smaller steps. And maybe it could be, just turning on your video on a Zoom call. And then that's step one. Step two is maybe posting a selfie. It could be, then step two is, well, you want to get more comfortable doing, again, being on camera and doing live interviews or live videos. Well, we think we always have to do everything alone. What? Like, have fun, bring somebody else along on the party. So do a live stream like what we're doing, and we're doing it with multiple people. That way it's not just you talking to a camera and not comfortable having that rapport with the camera, and have a rapport with somebody else. So it's just like really breaking it down, get creative, get fun, and realize that there's, again, that journey that you're on to become, taking that step and going after that lofty goal, it's yours. And then if you're not sure how to do it, and we're always going to have doubts, fears, and worries about taking that next step, finding someone that you trust to help you along that journey, who have different tools and strategies to help you overcome that negative self-talk, or sometimes even be that cheerleader to help you take the next step, or someone who believes in you before you believe in yourself, who needs that role that you need them to play. That would be something that I would share for people to do in order to take those steps and go after those big lofty goals.
I'd be curious what you think of this. The approach kind of I've taken with a lot of things is just getting comfortable being really bad at something the first time you do it, because at least you have a baseline and it's really easy to see progress. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It's a whole, again, where you start's not where you have to stay. Absolutely. Like, I'm sure if you looked at your first podcast together, it would be very different than where you are today. It's just understanding there has to be that first step, going in with it. What is your intention behind it? If you can, have some fun. And if you can have someone there for your first podcast being live, or you have a guest that's a really good friend that you're going to be comfortable with, who you trust to help you go through this process as well. That's a definite way to do things differently, but do it in a way that takes away that stress and overwhelm.
No, for sure.
Awesome. Now, while we're on that topic, can we transition to talk about what you're doing today? One of the things being the podcast.
Absolutely. So I'm doing a lot of different things. One is I do live streams, conversations with men or women around different topics that we dare. And I call it like dare to be something. Because I'm all about how do we dare to be unapologetically visible? Because at the end of the day, to show up, to take those uncomfortable steps, to be open to sometimes failing or succeeding, it takes a lot of courage. So how can we dare to do different things? So I'm doing the live stream conversations. I have a community all around women. It's called the Visible CEO Community. It's all about blending business growth with strategies and being visible, and creating a safe space for women to practice being visible. And then there is just speaking on the topics of visibility, confidence, and not even confidence, but I talk about forget confidence, focus on something else. And that's what is that goal? Getting that clarity about what it is you want to go after. Confidence is an outcome of you taking all those steps, and that rule of one. So talking about that, and then coaching. I do coaching with women in small groups so that we can deal with that mindset piece, that negative self-talk. But then how do you create those steps that work for you and align for you to achieve those lofty goals?
Okay, so for anybody who would like to get in contact with you or learn more about this, where can people reach you at?
Absolutely. So the best place is to find me on social media. I'm on LinkedIn or Instagram are the two places I hang out the most. Or you can check out my website at daniellejoworski.com.
Perfect.
Well, Danielle, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And for everyone who watched or listened to this conversation, thank you for letting us disrupt your everyday.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.